Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. My name's Brian Doyle and I'm here with Tim McNeil, my co-host today. Once again, we are without Rob Rogers. This is becoming a regular trend, isn't it?
I know, it really has been, right? Over the last
I gotta say, if I was doing attendance, he might be under 50% in our last quarter. I don't know.
I don't know if we've had the three of us here more than 50% of the time over the last since summer started.
So he's just trying to make you appreciate him when he is there, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're just going to put in special guest reference from him from here on out, and me and Tim are going to take over the show. But you guys may have heard a voice for those of you listening, via the podcast and not looking on YouTube today. And really, why is everybody here? Well, it's always for our guest, and our guest today is Frank Raimondi from IGI Cyberlabs, and you may be familiar with their product Nodeware out in the marketplace as well. So Frank, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate the time.
Now we love having our vendor friends on the show. It's one of our favorite weeks because we get to know y'all on the circuit as well. And we're excited to hear what you can share with us today. I think you want to tell us a little bit about cyber hygiene. If I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's kind of the point we want to get to. I think whether you're a beginner in selling security or you're an expert, there's one more stage always available to get to, and so there's just so many more requirements coming along these days that wherever you're at, it's not good enough, right? So it's we're trying to help people get to the next stage. There's lots of other tools and resources as well. So we can talk to that a bit.
We're looking forward to kicking that or, getting into that story, but we'd love to kick things off first learning a little bit about the person that we're talking to. So maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up in the world of the managed service provider and, some of the things that took you to this point.
Yeah. So as you can tell, those watching, I am a little bit older, so I like to say that I've been around the block a few times. I've been on the manufacturer side and vendor side for many, many years, started doing some technology consulting, tech transfer among Europe and the US, and then kind of went into Apple Computer for many years and worked there in sort of the early days of the Mac and pre iPhone and pre anything handheld pretty much. But sort of got my chops in there, and then went to 180-degree difference and went to Intel. Just from a cultural standpoint, back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was a very different world, but had 18 great years at Intel, worked primarily in the channel and kind of I would say kind of almost the beginnings of the MSP sort of transition, right? I worked at the time with a lot of system builders and sort of focused on enabling them to work together, right? My focus was very much on alliance and co-marketing activities of helping, the ecosystem around. Intel had the CPU, for a while had boards, but we needed to work with the memory folks and the software and the hard drives and the chassis and, et cetera, et cetera. There was, those 8 or 10 kind of key components that we had, my job, and one of my most enjoyable and productive jobs was bringing those different people together and those parties together to, provide the solution, right? That ended up being enabling a partner or, again, a system builder, an early stage MSP, whatever the terms you wanted to use, because they've all kind of come and gone, right? From all variations. But in the end, it's an advisor, it's a seller, it's a service provider to an end user, and so I've always had that kind of focus in my camp of the 1 + 1 = 3 when you do it right, and when you do it. That it's a win-win for everybody. So that's been a big focus. So again, went through Intel, was a couple years at Synnex, so I've understood the distribution side and worked even closer with vendors and partners. And then recently I've been doing some consulting with a lot of different vendors on sort of early stage and some established. And then IGI Cyberlabs came around as a project, and it was like, okay, this is an interesting solution. They definitely had some need for some more mature channel programs and activities and outreach. And kind of came on board last year and been, enjoying the ride so far. So brought me to here.
Well, that's a killer background for somebody in the industry to be able to say that you're both on the Apple and Intel side, and then spend a little time in distributor life as well. It's seeing both sides of the VAR coin, right?
Yeah. Well, I got to say, there was some definite eye-opening discussions and conversations and data. Is like, really? Do you care about that? Intel cared about, gross margins going from 55 to 54, whereas, Synnex is caring about basis points from, one sale to the next. So it's like, that's a different conversation.
Yeah,
so,
different beast. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by huge leaps and bounds. Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's kind of transition a little bit from your background now into the conversation of cyber hygiene. I know, when I'm chatting with the MSP community, and certainly as we're chatting about some of the things around governance, risk, and compliance, one of the biggest things that comes up is where to start, what really matters, especially in the SMB community. And what are the things that I need to prove out so a customer says it's just not going to happen to me, especially, which we hear a lot in the community we serve.
Absolutely.
We can make sure that they understand why it matters. Maybe you'd like to kind of kick off and tell us a little bit about, really in general, why should we care about cyber hygiene?
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the points I make when I'm talking out and about is, the MSPs are hearing every day, oh, I'm just a small business. Who cares about my data, right? Who cares about, my finances? Well, it doesn't, there may not be there a lot to worry about, but you got to think about you and your customers and your customers' customers and sort of those linkages up and down whether you want to call it supply chain or just the business process, day-to-day world. And, you still don't hear so much about the smaller SMB ransoms or hacks or breaches, just because there's so many of them, right? Who's going to cover, the news isn't going to put them on the story, but they are going to care about, Verizon getting hit or Tesla or, whoever the big name is of the, du jour. There's at least one big one a week. You could find somebody getting reported. I'm just thinking there was one the other day that was like, wow, that's huge. So what we're trying to help MSPs understand is that, you got to start somewhere, right? Because if you're not bringing a security discussion to your customer, then somebody else is going to be in a very short order, right? And if you're kind of conflicted between, well, they're already complaining about, my monthly fees or what I'm doing with them today, and or they assume that I'm doing this other laundry list of things, right? When I have, that's kind of on me, the MSP, to explain. That might be the starting conversation is, there's lots of news, there's security issues going on all over the place. Let me clarify exactly what we're providing today, what we're not providing, and it's available and we can do this service. But, again, it's a profitability issue. It's an expectation issue with between the MSP and their customers. So what we're trying to enable and encourage that conversation, right? And back to the cyber hygiene is that wherever you are, there's another step to go, right? You could have antivirus and maybe a firewall in your office. Well, okay, what's the next step? Because there's going to be some other step. Some MSPs that are using Nodware have a full stack, right? 10 items of security that if the customer's not willing to take the whole package, they're not going to take them on. So there's a wide range there of what MSPs are doing, and we're trying to help them really understand that and get some tools and education on that line.
Yeah. Well, I think just to touch on that a little bit more, one thing that we noticed, that Rob and I noticed, even though he's not here, Rob and I noticed last year just by going to a bunch of ASCII events was just the amount of security products, ways to go about it, right? I don't want to say everybody has a different opinion, but there are so many different avenues to go down.
Oh yeah.
I think it's great that you all have a system in which, not only do you have the product and the service to help people, but you can kind of help the MSPs guide them through that process, because look,
it's
weird world.
daunting. Yeah,
It's a weird world.
daunting. And I mean, I
Yeah.
was at Datacon a couple weeks ago, right? And 80% of the vendors in the hall are security saying one thing or another, right? So there's a lot, there's cyber fatigue, if you will, right? In
100%.
matching up against that cyber hygiene. But one of the things that and again, I'll lead it into our product a bit, but it's you can't protect and you can't secure what you don't know, right? I mean, people say it's kind of easy, but one of the first steps along this hygiene path, right? If you're at the entry level, or if you're afraid of that discussion, is you need to be able to identify the assets on a network, right? You need to know how many printers are in the building that have open ports that could be reached from an outside source, or just don't have the right protocols or updates on it. Or you forget about your IP cameras that are on the edge, right? That have access, right? That are reachable. So with that identification, that's sort of the first step. And just we hear it all the time, right? A customer says, "Oh, we have 100 employees. We probably have 150 total assets on the network." Well, no, you don't. You got at least 200, right? Because you can add in an iPhone that plugs into the Wi-Fi network, or you've got, again, the printers or the BYOD, any kind of BYOD, right? Any kind of service. And so, you got to know what those are. So you get that count of 200, which one helps you supply and provide the right cost to your customer, right? So you're not, over or under committing sources and not getting paid appropriately. But the second part of that identification is the sort of the risk assessment, right? Doing a regular, and in Nodware's case, a daily, vulnerability scan, right? You need to know what devices are highly vulnerable to start with, right? Again, that starting point. But you also need to, vulnerabilities are coming down every single day, right? The CVEs and all these different, known entities that are, could be from Cisco, it could be from HPE, it could be from, vendor Ubuntu, whoever, right? They all have updates, and the hackers that are trying to get there, I mean, they see those just as well as we do in a database, or, any MSP might, but they know who's got what, right? And they're going to go right after that vulnerability within 15 minutes, right? I mean, they start attacking any known vulnerability. And if you don't know what your systems are, or, you add in something between, let's say you do a pen test or a once a month vulnerability scan, 2 days later, this new CVE comes down, you can't afford to wait 28 days and risk that piece, right? So what we're, again, kind of back to where we're starting is the identification and the regular continuous scanning of those assets that you've identified. And we think we do that well. And I think, again, once you know that environment, right, and then now you can say to your customers, "Oh, right, here's 3 things that have to be done right now, right? Here's the other 7 things that are down the roadmap. Here's 5 things that we're going to cover in our monthly program and in our management that we're doing with you." So it's kind of, again, at starting point, right? You got to start somewhere for a lot of entry points. And then, if you are more sophisticated in your package, or in your full meal deal, if you will, to your clients, again, you might be doing some vulnerability scanning today, but once a month on the weekend doesn't cut it, right? You just can't wait for that, and you can't. So we address that through our patented technology, which allows the real time, and I can't say zero, but it's a very, very low bandwidth on the network.
So I want to unpack a couple of things that you brought up during your conversation there. First one being, really about some of those hidden IT assets that we don't get accounted for. So I'm going to take it from the spirit of, we're trying to convince our small to mid-sized customers that they do have a concern. And I've really heard 2 things kind of resonating with me that we need to identify. One, it's all those hidden IP addresses, and people don't think about that. I'm the owner of the company, and I happen to own my building. So I go out and buy all these smart devices to control and do all the building automation. But yet put it on just a VLAN on the same, core infrastructure that everything else is running on. Those are different assets that come in. You brought up our different iPhones and different things, smart boards, smart screens, all this kind of stuff that just pulls and pulls from IPs that we don't think about. And some of those are the most vulnerable. Think about even just IP cameras on your surveillance system. Here they are trying to protect you, and they could be the things that are actually going to allow the hack. So, what I always try to start the conversation with a small to mid-sized business is really around, they're not coming after you directly. It's a non-targeted attack, but they have the tools to be out there sweeping the networks out in the marketplace, looking for those holes of penetration to be able to come into your environment. And when they get there, it's not about you, it's just about the access and getting in there. And I think you were, really spot on that, in having a good cyber hygiene program, you can stop some of that type of attack framework that's coming after us that really isn't selecting that end user who says, hey, they're not coming for me. No, they're not coming for you, but once they know you got a door open, they're going to come.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting sort of segue into another feature that I've tried it in my own home. So with one of the sensors that we use, it's a Windows sensor. And so you can put an agent on a Mac. So your executive that's, maybe they're a medical or a financial services or some, they got sensitive data that they have to be careful about exposing. Well, let's say they take that agent home. So that's good. Their system is, tracking things. But what about their home network, right? What about that extension of those printers or the kid's Xbox that's coming in that's got who knows how many open ports and all that. So one of the things that we've had is the MSP has put a sensor on that device instead of an agent or in addition to an agent. So the sensor then can see all the devices on the home network and scan them on a regular basis. So they know, with that HP printer that's, it's in your kid's home, it's connected to the Wi-Fi, but that one, you just think about it, right? How many Nest cameras and smart TVs and all these other devices that are in a home that are potential entry points. If somebody knows that person lives there and can get into their tools, that they get the access. So you got to think beyond the clear endpoints that you normally protecting or that you're used to protecting.
Well, and I think you get down everything you just said, and then you add in something as simple as a baby monitor, right? I mean, how many times have you seen baby monitors get hacked? Like, it's just path of least resistance, right? You're only as good as your weakest link, and you use any analogy you want to there, but it's crazy, but it happens.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, now I'm an MSP. I bought into this concept of cyber hygiene. I know that I want to do the next step. Where do you think for not an MSP, but my customer of an MSP? Now I've bought into it. Where is the first place I should start in trying to really identify where my vulnerabilities are? Is it simply doing a scan and kind of looking at that information, or do you think there's some common areas that a business should look at first?
No, I think it's that initial scan, right? And with our product, I don't mean to be just pushing it too heavy, but the initial scan and within an hour or two, what the vulnerability scores are for all their assets, right? It's not a heavy tax or waiting for the weekend to do it. But again, once you know what you've got, then we do a free trial. You can get run a customer free trial for as many assets as they have. So you don't have to say, oh, you only get 100. We're going to scan everything on that customer's network during a trial, and you can see whether there's 100 or 200 or 500. Who knows? And you're going to see that vulnerability, how their vulnerabilities are. I mean, again, I don't mean to be so simplistic, but that's where you got to start, right? I mean, if you're not knowing what's on there and what their risk is, if that customer doesn't care, then it may be time to walk away, right? Because if they don't care, then they don't care about your business either, right? They're going to come back. They're still going to have their expectations, right? And what you're providing, but if kind of as we said before, if you're not clear on what you are providing and what you're not, and what the extra cost is for those services to be provided, you're just setting yourself up for trouble and potential failure.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, I guess, so one question I would have for you is, what about the people factor? Like people are usually the weakest link when it comes to
most
security
often.
attack. I mean, it's just kind of the reality. So
yeah,
how
no,
does that factor
I think there's actually a big opportunity there for MSPs to sort of add more value to their customers, right? Recommend, or there's different providers out there. There's HackAware, which we're actually doing an event with tomorrow. There's KnowBe4, right? There's a number of different providers. Even one of our integration partners, Threat Advice, has got a breach prevention platform that includes training and sort of gamification of the training to get people more going on it, right? Just be more aware of phishing and everything else that can happen. So if an MSP is not offering that today, then they definitely need to look at just, again, if they're the trusted advisor, solution provider, IT, the outsourced IT, then there's, again, it should be a relatively easy sale to the owner of their business, of their client. It says, hey, we've seen the data shows whatever it is, 80-90% of problems and breaches and ransoms are due to employee clicking on something they shouldn't, right? Or opening up something or bringing a device in that they thought was fine. Hey, I connected it, I used the password, that should be fine, right? If they're not getting employees aware, then they're kind of, it's could be a losing battle. Eventually, they're going to get.
I mean, a huge part of the security side of the world in general is just education and training, right? I mean, that's, you look at the MSPs, at least the MSPs that we're talking to that are just more mature as security is becoming more prevalent. A big part of what they do is education for their clients, and the more educated the consumer is, the better everything works. So
Absolutely,
it all just kind of plays into one there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys provide notes or speaker notes or whatever, but we can list a few of those educational or training providers in the mix. I think might be good to make available to them.
And kind of going off of that, one of the things that I think the MSP is struggling with right now is security is accelerated so fast, and their services are just starting to catch up, or for some of the more innovative ones, they're hitting stride, but a lot of them are struggling with finding talent. They're finding those security people. You just can't say, hey, this guy was my key senior engineer of the past, now I'm going to make him my cyber guy and have him go out there. So Frank, not to put the commercial on, but I do want to get into the discussion about the type of services that MSPs have to think about wrapping around this. How do you handle the InfoSec governance piece of this? And how do you make sure that there's kind of somebody steering the ship in the right direction and assessing the magnitude of risk before going, hey, we got to buy everything?
Yeah, it's good question. So again, IGI is the overall company. I'm with IGI Cyberlabs specifically, but it also represent our services side of the business. And the services, whether it's from us or from, there's a number of other providers out there, services like penetration tests and, incident response or risk assessment, right, are critical, third-party observations, right, third-party testing that, you as the fox watching the henhouse, you can't also be the grader of the fox. You can't make that lock easy enough for you to get in as well as somebody else. So there's some valuable services that in that regard that I think are worth understanding. And you maybe don't need it every day, right? But when you need it, right? Or, like a risk assessment, right? Somebody third party needs to do that. The other thing that becomes a little bit more strategic and more valuable that might be beyond the MSP's capacity or ability in the short term is a CISO, right? Sort of a virtual CISO. We have you call them fractional services, where maybe it's 1 day a week, maybe it's 2 days a week of time that the end user, client, or you, the MSP, needs to have that strategic discussion, right? So it's a different level of practical elements. So it's there's a value there in that service as well that, again, goes beyond what an MSP might be interested or might be available to do. And again, back to the, a full-time CISO for a business. And again, it's, 250, 300 grand a year if you can find them, right?
Yeah.
And that may not even produce a quality one. So, but if somebody needs to get started, right, they need to start with some strategic discussion and analysis, and that's what we can provide as well.
Yeah. Well, and also to piggyback off that, a lot of times in this scenario, you can't just take your top engineer and switch them over. I mean, it's a whole different skill set. It's a whole different education set right from the beginning that not everybody has. But that's the advantage to outsourcing something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're getting near the end of our session today. Frank, anything special that IGI is starting or Nodeware is doing in the near future? Any events you're going to be at that you want to have people stop by the booth and say hi?
Yeah, we've got a couple. We'll be at the 7-figure MSP event in Orlando at the end of October. We've got a couple of things going there. We've got. I'll be with one of our integration partners, SockSoder. We're kind of partnering with them at the IT Nation in Orlando a couple of weeks after that. In between, Channel Pro in Los Angeles, we'll be at the, it's a second and third in City of Industry is their next event. And then more broadly, we do a 2 different webinar series. One's a cybersecurity thought leadership series. So we bring in people like Chuck Brooks and others from CISA and other organizations. And it's just a public service for SMBs and for MSPs that are servicing them. You can invite your customers to listen in, but it's just sort of a, what's going on, what are the critical pieces that are important to look at. And then we also do a monthly live sort of demo session, peer Q&A, where we bring in one of our existing MSPs and sometimes a third-party speaker, just of what are the things that an MSP needs to learn about. Both of those, you can look at nodeware.com/events and see the schedule and see the recordings of past ones we've done. We've been doing them over a year, and they're very productive and very good insights, and just it's free. We very much focus it on a public service educational session. It's not a sell session, so it's something an MSP could invite their customers. Hey, you're learning about cyber insurance, right? Or you're curious about the NIST guidelines. Come listen and hear from the experts.
Awesome. So we will put that URL up in our show notes for anybody that missed it the first time I went through. It was nodeware.com/events. And, again, we'll make sure that that's part of the YouTube and website notes as well.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Well, Frank, I want to thank you for coming on today. For just from a personal standpoint, IGI is somebody, it's a company that we've had a history with going back, even predates you. Somebody that it's an old lead generation client of ours, and somebody very high up that I play hockey with, oddly enough. So very random how that all played out. So, but anyways, I want to thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. It's been great. Good conversation, and hopefully, your listeners can learn a few things and get started on that path.
Yeah. And for anybody listening out there, you can catch this podcast along with any one of our other podcasts from MSP Business School on any platform where you can find your podcast, to include YouTube. But for today, Frank, Brian, good seeing you both again, and look forward to seeing you both soon.
Yes, Frank, thanks for joining us. And Tim, it's always a pleasure to see you, especially without Rob.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.